right, morning everybody. Welcome to another round of coffee and questions. What's today's topic? Got a request from a ranch, like a barn down valley, to make a couple of signs for some horses. And I've got the extra wood lying around. Of course, you can buy it at Home Depot, Lowe's, wherever you want. It's just pine wood. But what I would caution you about as we go through this, I'll go through it step by step, and I'm going to show you how to lay this out. Easy way to do it. Maybe a good way to make some side money. The first thing is your wood selection. Now, when you go to Home Depot, Lowe's, wherever you're going to go, and you get one of these pine boards here, and this one right off of the shelf is 5.5 inches, and they come in different lengths. Take a look down it like this. Make sure there's no severe warping, twisting. Take a look at it like this. Make sure there's no huge cupping, anything like that, and get one about as straight as you can. That's my best advice. And it's rather, and it's relatively inexpensive, really. So, to speed this up a little bit, because it could be a long video, I'll try to shorten it and make it simple steps. So you got your wood selection, you got it home. Now, how are you going to cut it? We'll lay it down, and the next thing is to figure out your lettering size. Now, what I did and what you can do by going to Michael's, Hobby Lobby, some of these places, you can buy cutouts of the alphabet, and it also includes numbers from 1 to 0, 1 to 10, however you want to look at it, and you can get them like this. Now, the other method, if you don't want to go this route, is get some tracing paper, and you can lay it over the wood, and then use your computer and print out the size font or lettering that you want. Then you can lay it on here and just trace over it, and you'll have your lettering. Now for me, I already have these, so for today I'm going to go ahead and use these, and I'll show you how I do it. Now the first thing I do, and I'll zoom in here, is I draw a line straight down the middle here, just as a reference in the beginning. And then I already have my size letters, and somebody asked, well, what size are these? These are 3 inch. Now I've got 3 inch, 2 inch, and 1 inch because you can vary. You can start off with one of these as like a capital and then drop down to, the 1.5 or inch and finish writing out what you want. But I'm going to go ahead for these barn signs for the horses, and I'm just going to stick with the 3 inch because it stands out more. So you got that middle line drawn, and I'm going to zoom down here and show you and talk about it. So let me turn this around and I'll zoom in with the camera. Okay, so I have the line down the middle. Then I go ahead and I position these characters here, or like I said before, you use the tracing paper, you can get an idea of how you want to lay these out. Then I turn around, I stick them about right here in the middle. And then I measure from the border in, and that's about 1.5 inches, and it's about 1.5 inches, maybe just a little bit thicker up here. But I draw another line. Now, why do I do that? Well, these letters can turn on you and not look right. And if you want to keep them in a straight line, if I have that base line, I can just line them up because I have a flat edge along most all these bases. So this works out real nice for that. And I still have my center line as another reference if I needed it while I'm doing this. And then you need to lay it out. And I figured, okay, I laid it out roughly, and then I took some measurements on each end. This is 1.5 inches, 1.5 inches, and I make a couple of marks like this. Now I know that all my lettering has to fit within these 2 vertical lines. If I drew them, I just made little marks. Now I turn around and I start laying out my lettering again, and you're going to find you're going to want to tweak these just a little bit because of spacing and stuff. Okay, just like this, until you have it looking perfectly fine. Okay, now I'm going to take the camera, we're going to go outside, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to lightly dust this. You can use black primer, Rust-Oleum makes it, I'll leave you the link below. Another inexpensive product is Marsh ink, and it's black, and it just comes in a spray can, and I'll leave you the link below. It also is cheap. And I just spray this lightly, and then this will take care of the lettering part of this. So I'll meet you right out there, and we'll go ahead and we'll do that here in just a sec. Okay, so I have this out on a workbench, and I went ahead and I adjusted all my spacing, and I adjusted my letters to this bottom line like this. Now with this Marsh ink or whatever you're going to use, you want to stay a distance back from the wood itself so that you don't blow the letters off of the wood. Now you want to shoot it at different angles, across the top, across the bottom, up, down, all around. And get rid of all that white. Okay, so at this point we went ahead and we just took the letters off. Now you want to set up to do the routering, and you can use a trim router or you can use a more powerful router. Now I have both, but I'm going to go back inside. I'll talk to you about the trim router. We'll just use the trim router for this project. So the next step after we set up the router, which I'll show you in a minute, is you want to get this kind of secure up here so it doesn't move around on you when you're routering it. So I just get these little wood blocks, like right here, and with drywall screws, you don't have to screw it all the way into a bench. And you can use clamps, okay? You can do any of that stuff. You can turn around and just set this like this. Now in this case, I could put a clamp here and I can put a clamp on this other end. And then you can start your routering, and then you'll have to unclamp, move it around, you know, you'll have to do different things. Another way that you could do this, like I said, is with these blocks. I just put a block here, you can put a block over here, you can put one down there, you can put one over here, and you can just hand screw this in to a wood bench. If you have one like I do, it won't do hardly any damage, the drywall screws, and it's a workbench anyway. But let me go in, let's talk about that trim router. We'll come back and we'll set it up just like this, and then we'll start carving. Okay, so I know I said I'd start off with just using the trim router, but I set up both routers here just to make it a little bit faster in terms of the video. But you can use the trim router, to do the whole project, because these are small signs. So I start off with this really sharp pointed, I call it a detail bit. I'll leave it in the description below. And then on this one I have a 90-degree bit. Okay, this is hooked up and ready to go. Now, I went ahead and I put it in here. I'm going to tighten it up and I'm going to show you. But when you put these bits in, you don't sink them all the way to the bottom. I put them in maybe about half or 3/4 of the way. And this has a button you just push down to lock it. I screw this on finger tight. I got my spanner wrench. I tighten it up. Okay, then this is how deep it's going to go. That's way too deep. So I set it like this. Give me just a second. By screwing the side on mine, it moves the plate up and makes the depth shallower. So you're wondering how deep. I make it as deep as the spanner wrench. So that's still a little too deep. That right there is perfect. And then on the side, I go ahead and I lock it down. Now I'm ready to go. Get some safety glasses on. I'll meet you back out there. We'll go around the lettering with the detail bit, and I'll show you how I pull the rest of this together. Okay, I'll take the sound part out of this, but I have this ready to go, and I'm going to use that fine bit, and I'm going to do an outline all the way around all these letters, and then I'll be right back. Okay, now that's how it'll look like, the outlining with that detail bit around each letter. So I'll be back with you in a few minutes as soon as I get it all done. Okay, so we went ahead and we finished cutting the outline on all of these. Now, I want to have a border around this because we're going to carve on the background here. And I'll show you how to do that in a sec. And then these letters will stand out, and then we'll start going into the finishing process. So, to create the border, here's what I do. I just take a pencil and I hold my thumb real hard against how much I want to go in. Like, let's say I want the border about like right in here, and I just hold my finger tight and I just go like this. Okay, so now with the border drawn all the way around it, well, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to get the other router out here, and I'm going to start carving out this background. And then we're leading into the finishing process. So what you can do, you can round these corners. You just use a lid off something, make a couple of measurements, and then you can round them. You can also create a notch in here of some kind, you know, however you want to do it. Now, we're lucky enough, I'm going to keep this project simple. These people just wanted me to leave them square. So it makes it a little bit easier. So let's go ahead, let's carve out this background. Be right with you. So what you're going to do when you start off with this router, you're going to go crisscross, up, down, sideways, all around, back and forth, and create this kind of rough looking pattern here. Now, the other thing is, they wanted these signs to look distressed, so I didn't stay perfectly on the line. I made little divots here and there, and I'm going to show you how we're going to kind of make this look old in a little while. But right now, you want to take out all this background. That's what we'll do, and I'll be back with you in a few minutes. Okay, folks, so we're back from carving out all of this background all the way around here, and it's still real rough. Now, the next thing that I do, and it doesn't cost very much, I got a brush from the dollar store, and I have an ice pick. I've got a couple of old chisels, you know, small ones, and I got an old screwdriver that I've ground the tip on to make it a little sharp. Now, what I do is I go around all of these letters using the ice pick, various tools, and I clean up all of these edges all the way around, and I go all the way around here with that. And I leave the rest of the pattern, you know, this crisscross background, I leave all of that intact. Okay, I just go around now, all the letters inside and out, using these tools, which pretty much everybody's got laying around their shop or their garage. Now, when I'm done with that, I use the scrub brush, and I go in every which direction. And what that does, it gets off all the little fuzzies, nibs, stuff like that, because we're going to start the finishing process here in just a sec. Okay. Anyway, you clean it off or you can blow it off. Okay, now what's the next step? We're going to go into sanding now, and I'm going to sand because what sticks out is this bordering in these letters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rough sand this with 150. I mean, this pine has got somewhat of a sanded kind of a finish to it already, I suppose. So you don't need to go any thicker grit unless the wood's messed up or unless you want to give it a distressed look. So we're going to start with 150 and an orbital sander, and I'll be right back. Okay, I sanded it with 150, and you can see I didn't take all that black off. I don't want all that black off, and I'm going to show you why. We're going to use some dyes just to have some fun. We're going to have some dyes, and we're going to change the color of how this whole thing looks. So what I'm going to do now is with that marsh ink, I'm going to spray all this background. Now, I'm not going to solidly paint all this background black, but I'm going to paint most of it. I'm going to do the bordering in black, and I'm going to cover the letters lightly in black. I'll show you what I mean. Give me just a sec. Okay, you see I didn't paint it all solid black. I kind of did here and there and everywhere and did it lightly. Now we're going to sand back on the letters, but not all the way. We're going to just sand it some and the edging. I'll show you. Okay, you can see here where I've sanded it now, and I've brought back some of that white. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a red aniline dye, and I'm going to coat this whole thing. I'll be right over here, show you in just a sec. Okay, here's the sign. Okay, like I said, lightly sanded back now over the black. Okay, so now I've got some aniline dye. Now what I do is this comes in a powder. I'll leave you the links below. But what you can do is you could get a mason jar or any kind of a container, put water in it, and then you start adding the aniline dye, which is a powder. Now you can also use trans tint. That is more like in these small bottles. It's kind of expensive, but it does last you a long time. And we'll do trans tint on another video, but for right now, the aniline right here, and I mixed it up. I just started adding it in, and no particular measurements, and because you can make it lighter by sanding it if it comes out too dark on the wood, I can also make it darker by adding a little bit more aniline dye till you get what you want. But I go ahead and I mix this up, Now the harder part is going to be this background because of all of the cutting that we did. So you want to use one of these dollar store brushes, and all you got to do, and don't worry about going over the letters too many times or anything like that. It doesn't really matter. What you're doing is you want to get this whole thing kind of covered with the red. Dollar store brush it works really well. The dollar store brushes work real well for stuff like this. And all this is just, you know, water. So it, you know, mixing with the aniline. So not a big deal. You got to look at it and make sure you get everything covered. And after you go one way, flip this thing around at all different angles so that you're able to see that you got all these little nooks and crannies. All right, there it is. And you'll let this dry for about an hour probably. It'll dry quick, but I like to have this nice and dry. So it doesn't need to be picture perfect, but we want to make it look good. All right, there it is. Now, once you've painted it with that ruby red, using the brush from the dollar store and a rag, both actually, it's easier, like I said, to do the background with the brush. Here's what you have so far. We're going to let this dry, probably an hour or more. I'll be back, and then we're going to sand it again. Like I said, 220, 320, and I'll show you how a trick here to make this look really awesome and not just pine. One last thing, while we're waiting for it to dry, the letters are kind of outset. They're coming out at you. If you did it the other way and carved just within the letters, it'll go a little faster. It's probably a little bit easier. And you can actually make open and close signs, and you can put stain on these. Now, on this, I just used a can stain. That's all. I had it laying around. I sprayed the black, I sanded it real good, and then I put the stain over it, and then I went over it with varnish. Now these turn out real well, and you probably sell these quite a bit. Now here where I am, I've sold them, and I've shipped some of these off, okay? So these are easy to do, because you could cut up a whole bunch of these at once, router a whole bunch of them at once, and then you can finish them a bunch of different ways. You got probably plenty of stores around you, I mean, to where you could go maybe peddle these. Or a swap meet, I don't know, something like that if you're doing those kind of things. But open and close signs, they're always useful. Or you can do ones that have people's names on them, like the Williams or House of Fred, or, you know, whatever you want. And you can also do, you know, cartoon designs, because you can use tracing paper. You can use that detail bit. You can do a whole bunch of different things. I'm just showing you things that are simple and easy. I make these signs for the horses all the time. I ship them up north, and I also make a lot of them down valley, you know, and so it fuels my side hobby here, you know, in buying other tools and stuff like that, and it helps feed the strays. But you can do it. You might have a better market. All right, I'll see you in a few minutes when this dries. The sign's now totally dried. I'm going to use 220, and I'm going to sand this, and I'm going to take some of this red away. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I went ahead and I sanded it with the 220. This is what we have, and I lightened up that red. And the red is what was sitting on top of the black, and I lightened that up. And then I went over it with the red. Again, I lightened it up by sanding with 220. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to apply yellow. Let's see what we got. Okay, so I zoomed in, and this is the back of it. So play around on the back of it, and I'll show you the front. So let's put this on. It's kind of like testing, and look at that. It comes to life with this orange reddish color. I think it looks pretty good. Let's see. All right, I'm gonna let that dry, then we'll flip it over. I'll prop it up just a little bit so you can see it a little better. Now this is the yellow, and what I do is I hit all along in between the letters. It'll give it just a little bit of kind of character. All right, that's good there. Now let's do the border. Okay, so now I'm going to let that dry, and it's got that orange reddish kind of a look to it. Just touch it up wherever you think it needs to be touched up. Just make sure that everything's covered. Now if you want to, immediately after putting this on, you can go over it with a wet towel real quick, and that will lighten this up. But I don't want to lighten this one up. I'm going to leave it just a little bit darker, because this goes in a barn right outside of the horse's stall. And the other ones I did for them, I did in a very similar way. So we'll be back with you in a minute, and then what we're going to do is we're going to spray some clear coat on there. Now I usually use Helmsman, and I know that that's a little expensive for some people. You can use Rust-Oleum. Now you can use the satin, the semi-gloss, or you can use the gloss. But we'll come back in a few minutes. We'll discuss that and I'll show you what we're going to use. So I'll see you in a few minutes. Well, probably a couple hours. I'm going to let this dry real well. Okay folks, this is morning and this is after 5 coats of that Rust-Oleum gloss. Turned out pretty good. I'm just going to drill a couple of holes in it for them to use zip ties and attach it to the railing, out at the barn. Anyway, that'll conclude this. If you have any questions, drop it below. Otherwise, we'll move on to another project here. I hope you click subscribe. I hope you keep following me, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.